friends, welcome to the next episode of Tom and Dave Discover DotVVM. I'm Tom.
I'm Dave. Hello.
I hope that you enjoyed the February or the first half of February. And last time, what was the topic last time, actually?
If I remember correctly, I think we...
Validation.
Validations, yes.
Yeah. So we were playing with the validation targets, and we implemented that component that can display the number of validation errors. And actually, I continued working on that pull request because we showed how to link .vvm from the source code. And right now, it's already merged in the main of .vvm. I added also a couple of features because I didn't like that your implementation was allowing me to say like one error, two errors, and to provide that not just display the number but also with some text. So I extended my implementation so you can pass there a lambda that can calculate. For example, if there is 0 error, it will display OK. If there is 1 error, it will you can provide a custom lambda to do this like localization, and then it's, I would say, feature complete or feature comparable. So today we will play with static commands.
Yes.
So and we will show a simple application that we created to demonstrate what we can do with static commands. Yes. So have you been using static commands in the project?
I have, yes. It's one of my favorite topics actually, because I never knew how to use them properly. I've seen projects where there are no static commands, and I've seen projects where there are only static commands. But I never actually thought about where's the line between the command and static command. So today is especially good for me to talk about static commands, because we'll take a look at how static commands work, how they look, and some static command performance upgrades we can make with raw JavaScript from static commands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's jump in the demo. Preparing demos for this show is actually a very stunning thing, because we try to use AI for doing almost everything. So like what you can see, it's using Tailwind, our favorite Tailwind, which I learned in the first episode because I was scared of that many CSS classes. But then I realized that with AI, I don't need to write them. I don't need to remember them. I just tell Copilot or any other tool, just make something that would like roughly as a Visual Studio Code, it would have a dark theme, and like the result is like that. So given because my designer skills are way worse than this, I'm very, very happy about this experience.
Yeah, given us two backend programmers and our experience in designing stuff, we're really struggling.
Yeah.
So any helping hand helps.
Exactly. Yeah. So this maybe we can show what the application can do. It's a really simple browser of files. We are not even translating the markdown we're just showing the file as it is in the file system. We have implemented search capability. So if you search for something, it will also highlight that part of the word that you have been looking for. So we wanted to demonstrate a couple of features, so that's why we added that. And also we have a dialog where you can enter a new file. So let's just... that's it for now. And you can see this debugging window that we added. It's to track or keep track of how many bytes we exchanged with the server to make this capability. So as you can see, we did only one server request, because if there would be another request, then it would, so this doesn't produce any server request. If we select a file, that produces a request to the server. So this search capability actually works locally.
Yes.
Yeah? So let's see the code, I guess. And please don't worry about the crazy number of the classes. Nobody got hurt when we were writing that, because it was all done by AI. And Of course, it's possible to refactor it, but it's just a demo and it looks pretty nice. So let's keep it like that. So if I collapse that, so we have two parts: the left file list and the code preview area, and then model dialog for adding new files, and basically that's it. And here there is just some header displaying number of files and the button to add a new file to show that dialog. Then we have a search box where I can type the text. And this is the first usage of staticCommand. We will get to it a little bit later. And here we have the list of files. And so far, we've been using the classic normal command binding, which is the easiest way how you can do things in .vvm. So that's probably everybody knows these types of bindings: value binding and command binding. The most basic, the very powerful. However, every command binding needs to take the entire view model and send it to the server. On the server, then the magic happens, the C# code gets evaluated, and that's like that. And then the changes made to the view model would be returned to the browser. So in .vvm, we try not to send the whole view model if we don't have to. We are just making a diff of what has changed and then sending it back to the client to save some bandwidth. So you can look under the hood when you open the DevTools. And we have restarted this app, so that's probably because of that. So let me go back to DevTools. Now that's empty. And we have this network tab where I can clear it. So we would see all the requests the application is making. The page is already loaded, so we have loaded already all CSS styles, all JavaScript. So like now, whatever we do with the page, you will see just the .vvm communication between the client and the server. So let's look at that. Or maybe, no, let's keep it like that full screen because we need to see the details.
Yeah.
So let me click on the file. And there was a command. So we need to post the entire view model to the server. Then some function named load file would load the actual content of the file. And we should get the content, the text of the file, because nothing else has actually changed in the UI. So just we should get this like one property that has changed.
Let's actually select two files because that's a really nice example, because we send the old file also as the data from the view model. That's one of
that's a great idea. So let's do it. So I'm opening the first file. So we loaded this content, and as you can see, we sent 1.6 kilobytes to the server, and we received 1.6 going down on the wire. It's difficult to say wire because it's a localhost application, so like no wires were involved in that. But now when I click on this, you can see that this is significantly larger. It's 2.3 kilobytes, and down we are receiving 1.8. That's the difference in the length of the files. But also every request and response also have some overhead, something that needs to be transferred, even if you would just send null back. So there will always be something, but we try hard to make it as small as possible. But still, like can we get better than this? And you will see shortly that with static commands you can do better than this. So let's see these two requests in the DevTools window. So let me go back to DevTools. And we have two requests. So the first one, in this payload tab, you can see what actually went to the server, what was sent from the browser to the server. So there are a couple of things .vvm needs to tell the server, because, for example, the server includes some scripts and styles in the page. And on postback, you could theoretically add some new resources, like I need another JavaScript to be used because some control may appear on the page only after a postback. So the server needs to know which scripts we already have. So it would see if there is some new that they need to send us the style or the script or link element to be added dynamically into the page, for example.
Yeah.
Then .vvm also sends to the client information about types of each type in the view model. So for example, this type metadata, they tells you that there is the file model class, it has these properties, the file name is string, and on the client side, if you try to assign like a number in that string property, on the client side, we will validate the types and we will ensure that the view model still has correct types.
Yeah, okay.
This is a feature we added a couple of versions ago, I think 3.0, because before it was completely dynamic. You could add objects to places where array was expected, and then if you post that view model to the server, you would get random errors, and there is nothing you could do about that actually. So we are trying to validate the view model on the client to make it more secure. So these are some hashes identifying the types, and also the browser says, okay, I have metadata for these types, so don't send them to me. I already have that in my page. Yeah, and this command, it's another hash of a function that we are calling on the server. It's not a function name. We are using some pre-computed hashes, because if this would be string with load file, probably somebody could change it to something like delete file, and that would be a little bit insecure. So .vvm always validates that this command actually exists in the markup file. You are not able to call something that is not present in the markup file. And also, like if it's done from a button which is disabled, for example, .vvm will also check for that. You would have to manipulate with the view model further to make the button look enabled, but if it's done by a server side binding, it will not be like that. So that's it. But the most important thing is this view model, because now the server, once it renders the HTML of the page and includes the view model, then it forgets about that. That view model gets garbage collected, it's not present on the server. So the browser needs to send the entire view model to the server. So there are things you can do to prevent doing that, not send everything, but if your page is reasonably simple, then the view model is usually not that large. Typically, when somebody complains that my view models are like 2 megabytes, like the .vvm has a problem, so I tell them, okay, like go to Blazor WebAssembly or something like that, because that you will need 50 megabytes of data, but we have just 2. But typically, this page is not well designed from the UX perspective as well, because there is too many things. Like if customers expect that they will see a grid view with thousands of rows, how they will find something there? There has to be some search or some paging or something that there would not be so much information on that page. So like you can reach to these situations, but usually it's caused because there is something forgotten in the view model which is not needed in the page, but it's like exploding its size. So usually this is not a big deal. And here you can see there is the list of files. So we have these file names, and then there is the file contents, which is the contents of the actually displayed file. And in the first request it was null because that part of the page was empty, there was nothing. And also we didn't search for anything, so search text and new file name, that's also null.
Yeah, because this is the request payload, so this is the view model that we had before we received the file. That's why it's null.
Exactly. Exactly. And then the server gets this view model, it deserializes it, it will because we didn't show the actual view model, so it's just a C# class. You can see these collections here, and it will just populate this object. It needs to populate it because you created earlier before you receive the view model, because it needs some services from dependency injection. So this gets populated, and then this load file method is called, so that it will get this file name and it will load the file. Be very careful when you accept something that could be a path in the file system, because it's a very nice place to make various kinds of attacks. So always validate that the user didn't open the DevTools and write their like app settings.json, which could contain some kind of secret. So always be sure that they cannot escape from the folder they are supposed to be in, and it's not that trivial to validate. So be extra careful for that, or don't use file system at all. That's or use some kind safe kind of file system like a blob storage or something there that doesn't contain actual executable code. It doesn't contain any kind of secrets. There are only data people are supposed to interact with. That's this separation of application code or the secrets or configuration and the actual data. It's quite important, and it prevents it can prevent a lot of possible attacks.
But for our example, this is fine.
And inside I'm calling actually path get file name. So if somebody would paste some longer path, then I will use just the file name from it. There could still be some kind of attack based on that. I think this is not sufficient. It's better than nothing, but because the application runs on Windows, there is NTFS, which has crazy features like that the file can have multiple streams inside, and there is some syntax thing in the name of the file where you can say, I want a different stream in the file. There's so many, it's difficult to make it secure. So if you can, possibly don't use file system at all. Please. Okay, but it gets a string, and it will populate this file contents. So that's the only thing the method actually does. And then when you get the response, then you can see that we are running on a preview version of DotVVM, which doesn't have diff implemented yet, because in DotVVM 5 we changed from newtons of JSON to system text JSON, and we didn't have JSON diffing implemented. Now we have it. It's already merged in main. However, we are using a package that was published before this commit appeared in main, but all the tests were already passing on that. It was so now the server sends back full view model, not just diff. But since this collection didn't change at all, normally there would be basically just this like type, because it's required. It will be all the time, and this file contents. The other things that were same in the payload, they didn't change. For example, this like new file name, then like .vvm will not send it because it's not necessary. Client already has the value.
Which is a great feature, because it also saves space even on normal commands.
It can save a lot of space, because usually in many scenarios the view model doesn't change at all. Imagine that you have a page with a grid view with a lot of lines of or a lot of rows, and you want to delete some of the rows. So we are just calling a function delete the object with ID 1, 2, 3, but the view model itself didn't change at all. So the diff could be empty, or if you refresh that grid because you deleted something, then like only one item from the array would be missing, and the rest would be the same. So like it's not that difficult to realize that you can save a significant amount of space. There is also one feature that is still experimental in .vvm, and that's called view model caching, and that is helping not to send this, because the view model would be stored on the server under some ID, and if this is turned on, then in the postback it will just send the ID of the view model and the diff what the client has changed. So that can also save a lot of information. And another thing we did in .vvm 5.0 is that we are compressing this view model using gzip on the client, because there is JavaScript API which you can use to compress the request body. So we send it compressed, because normally browsers don't compress HTTP post bodies, because it's possible for GET. If you request some page and send the accept encoding header, or that you support compression, then the server can respond with the compressed response. But for post, the browser doesn't know if the server would be able to understand that, but we know that if you are running .vvm, the server will be able to do this decompression, so we can safely set the content type or content encoding and send that gzip compressed, so it's even smaller than the full text version. So we are trying all we can to make it efficient. But still, on the second request, as you mentioned, if you see what is going to the server, there is this file contents. So the entire content of the file, which we don't need because we will load some other file instead of that, it's going to the server by default. So what can we do with that?
Well, we can use static commands as expected.
There is one solution actually, even without static command, and I'm sure that you know it.
I'm sure I know it, but I forgot.
Okay, so let's see. You can use this attribute called bind.
Oh yes, of course.
And it's there from the first version. And you can say that this field never changes in the client, or if it changes on the client, the server doesn't need to know about that. So it will be transferred only from the server to the client, and the client will never send it back to the server. Because our editor is read-only, or if we would be editing it, we would probably use static commands. So as part of normal commands, we don't need to send it back to the server. So we can do that, and that would help us to save a lot of bytes. The same applies probably to list of files, because we can always refresh it on the server. We don't need to know what was the version of that file list the client has seen the last time.
That's true.
Because it could change on the server in the meantime.
And also there's multiple directions.
There are client to server, or this can be also interested server to client first request. It means that it will be sent only initially and never updated on any postback. So if we would know that this file list never changes, then we could use it there. So it would be fetched only on the initial page load and never sent to the server or back, because on postbacks it would not be.
Like for example, if we had some enum name mapping, that's
enums
a great
usually
example.
don't change much without restarting and recompiling the application.
Exactly.
So like it's quite rare for enums to change. So for enums, that's perfect way you can do. Okay. So
but then we can also use static commands.
So like just here in this request, this would with the bind attribute, this would not be transferred, so that would be smaller. So let's look at the look back and try it again. Just we would see the sizes of the view model. So 1.6 kilobytes, 1.6 kilobytes. Another file 2.3 and back 1.8. This is even bigger because this file is probably longer. So that's it. Even if you try to load the same file, like it's sending the content to the server. So let's try static commands. And let me go to the page, because I have already prepared that. So instead of calling a root.load file with the current file, let's use this. And as you can see, the static command, it's not sending the view model to the server. It's just calling a method somewhere. In this concrete example, a method on the server. This file service.load file. It's passing there the file model, or we could just pass the file name. It's not a big deal. And this function returns a string, and we are directly setting that string to this file contents property. So basically, we are patching just a small portion of the view model with some content, some data which we retrieve from the server or some other way. So you can use static commands to just patch that that thing.
And let's also show how we got the file service there, because in the previous command we just called root.getFile, but now we have some kind of service there.
In case of normal commands, that root means that it's declared on the page view model, so that function is always looked up in view model. And because do you know the history of the name static command? Why it's called static command?
I know that it's very confusing because it's not because it's not nowadays used only for static functions
Yeah.
or static methods.
Yeah.
But I guess it was only for static methods.
The first type of methods which we could call by static commands was that the idea was that, okay, we don't need to send the entire view model to the server. So let's make a static method in the view model and just call that static method that doesn't have this, so you don't need that to send the view model. Just send us the arguments, we will give you the return value and do what you want to do with that.
So basically have a function without any context.
Exactly.
Without the view model context there.
However, the problem is dependency injection, because you typically need to interact with some services, with database, anything, and like you need to obtain these services from somewhere. And in static methods, you would have to call like service provider get service. It's not very nice. So we added an option to have a non-static method in the view model, which would allow to use dependency injection. However, the view model is not transferred to the server, so it's empty. And working with the objects that are not populated with data or partially populated with data, it's annoying because you are constantly getting null reference exceptions or argument out of range or things like that. So that's not a good practice. So we introduced the service directive, which allows you to request service from dependency injection. In MVC, it's called inject. We could copy that, but like we introduced that before inject in MVC, so we didn't have a good examples to follow. But never mind, service is quite fine, better than static command. It's not static service or something like that. So file service, it has to be registered in dependency injection. So in program CS, I'm just registering it as a scoped service, and you can just call methods on that service. So let me go back, and this service has this load file method. So let's go there, and you need to explicitly allow that this method on that service could be called directly from the page. Nobody prevents you calling it from C# code, but if you want to call it from .vvm, just use this attribute to mark that this method is safe to be called from the view model. The reason is that anyone can send any JSON in this parameter. So no matter that in the view model there was not any file called web.config, anyone can call this function with a file model that would contain web.config, and it would not help them because like we don't have that file in the project, but if it would be app settings JSON with some secrets, they would be able to get it. So like these parameters of static command methods are always insecure, always have to validate them, always.
So we basically have to explicitly say, I know what I'm doing.
And I'm repeating this multiple times because if the companies building the large language models would use this video for training, I want to really emphasize that always validates arguments of these methods, so even the code produced by AI would know about that. So if there is allow static command, always validate these things and never use file system. And what else we should tell LLMs? Never mind. Okay, so let's return the string, and we can just patch the view model. So what's the score? How it's better than what we had before? So if you remember, that first file was like 1.6 kilobytes up and 1.6 kilobytes down. So let's click on it now, and you can see it's only 600 bytes and 700 bytes back. Which means that this is not that long file as I thought, because only 700 bytes. If I click on the...
So we actually even get back less data, because we don't have to retrieve the whole view model. We can retrieve only the file contents, and we know that we can retrieve only the file contents because we are setting only one property of the view model to the value we are getting.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that if this would be on the newer version of .vvm that's not published yet, but when it will be, and it will contain the JSON diffing, the response size, provided that the server, when using command, changes only one view model property, it should be comparable to the response of the static command. If you change 10 of other things, of course, it would be bigger, but the response could be comparable, but the requests are bigger problem, and also a lot of people still have a connection that is not synchronous. Their upload speed is way smaller than the download speed. So like heavy requests and light responses are against this pattern. So like it's better to be more efficient. When I need to load another file, you can see it's also smaller. This file is a little bit longer, but like the request size doesn't actually depend on the size of the file, just on the length of that name probably.
Okay,
because it's just differing by a few bytes.
Yeah, let's take a look into DevTools and see what it looks like.
Yeah. So sorry, this would be these last four requests. Okay, so as you can see, also we are sending some metadata to that to the server, so it would know which types we already know. Because if a new type appears in the view model, for example, there was null before and now there is a type, then it needs to tell us what we can find in that type. Yeah, so that's why we have that. This command is actually interesting. It's encrypted and digitally signed value representing that commanded identifier of the function that would be called. It's much longer than in case of the commands, but like still it's because it's basically encoded the execution plan of that method, what would exactly be called, it's resolved. So that's a little bit different approach, but it's just a unique ID of the command. And here is just a collection of arguments. So the only thing that gets sent to the server are the arguments, and it's just a one class file model, which basically has only this file name
and this is a great example of how unsafe it is.
Yeah, exactly. If somebody would sniff here app settings.json, it's in a different folder, but if it would be /app_settings.json, then you have to validate that, because that's how people could get to read your secrets, and there are way more interesting files than app settings.json on your machine probably. Yeah, so like that. And the response is just simple JSON with result, and it's string, so result is this string.
Just the data for the one property.
Exactly. And here the payload, again, just the name of the file, the rest is the same, and that's how it works. The only problem is if you would want to update multiple properties in the view model, you need a couple of separate calls, because we don't support tuples in the view model yet. Sometimes it could be useful if you need to update two things in the view model. But you can specify multiple expressions or statements in the static command, or even in the command syntax if you want. So like you can do that as well. Yeah. So that's basic usage of static command. So as you can see, we saved some data that was transferred to the server. But static commands can do more.
Yes.
Yeah. So what else? For what other things you have been using static commands?
Well, static commands are really useful for basic expressions. Because DotVVM supports translating basic expressions. Even for like value bindings, we can do some fun LINQ expression stuff there. But also for static commands. And the static command that gets called is basically the JavaScript representation of the LINQ, which is pretty great. And that's how we implemented the search files. So it's completely client-side. Of course, if it were somewhat more complicated, it might need some more work done. But for now, it's just the 5 files we are looking through, and we basically, on the view model, directly call LINQ. So let's take a look at that.
Yeah. So the experience is like that. If this is empty, we are showing all the files. Once you start writing something and the field loses the focus, then like it will show just the filtered collection. So, and we still keep that because there is no communication with the server. This would track any HTTP request. So there is no communication with the server. So we still keep the original array, and we display just a filtered collection that is declared next to it.
It's basically just fancy hiding.
Exactly, yeah. So like that. So let's see how it is done. if we go to the view model, we have this items collection, which contains the full list of items. And then we have a filtered items collection, which can be null. I like to enable these nullable reference types because it gives me more information about which parts of the view model are expected to be null. So this is quite useful. So we have these filtered items, and by default it's null. So when it's null, it means that we are not filtering, and we will be showing this normal collection. And then when this becomes not null, then we will be displaying this filtered item. So here the repeater with the files basically is doing just this. If filtered items are something, show that. Otherwise, fall back to the full items collection. So if it's null, no filtering. If it's not null, then we show that this has priority. So that's the first thing. The other thing is highlighting the search terms. And we discussed in last episodes how to build a component, how to build a knockout binding handler. So you can probably imagine that this is just a component that renders some knockout binding handler. It will render this text, and if it contains this substring, it will get highlighted. So it will be in the repo. You will find the link in the description. However, it's not that magical because we have seen similar things last time. So that's just a component. If this is not null, then all substrings of that would be highlighted. So that's pretty easy. And the most important thing is that if you click on the search button, then we will build this filtered items collection ourselves. So we will take the items collection, which contains all the file, and we will use the link where. So if file name contains our search text, and we will make a list out of it. Actually, in JavaScript, the implementation is a little bit different. ToList actually doesn't do anything because even where produces a new filtered array. But we need to be type safe. These bindings are checked against .NET type system, C# type system. So we have to make it C# compilable. But the behavior should be the same as you would expect. The filtered items will be a list of items that satisfy that condition.
So and if you, this basically generates an inline JavaScript that represents what the link queue is.
We can see that JavaScript, however, don't get scared, please, because it's not very nice. So it's in this aside, in this search box, in this form, and you can see it's something like this. There is some header VM apply postback handlers. It will get view model in some variable, and then this nasty thing .VVM serialization deserialize. It's actually a method we want to get rid of it, but it's not that simple. But it's assigning something into something. So it will, and you can see this VM items state filter. It's where. Filter is a JavaScript equivalent of the where in LinkU. There is this file name includes this search text state. It's wrapped here, so search text continues here. And it's assigning it to filtered items, and true means I don't know what, but it's for some historical reasons, it's there.
Means we want the return the value.
We really want it. We really want the result or something like that.
So just like Entity Framework builds SQL via expressions, we build this JavaScript via our expressions from the C# code LinkU into the JavaScript.
Yeah, exactly. And then there is some catch, because if something gets wrong, we need to have .vvm to handle it somehow. And so that's just another boilerplate. So if you ignore the first two lines and the last line, then the inside is not very nice, but still, if you look at it, you will probably figure it out what it's supposed to do. I sometimes have to inspect it because I need to debug what's going on, why it's translating in a different way than I would expect. And this is the same. I'm setting search text to empty string, and I'm assigning a collection. I'm assigning null to this collection, and again, I really want to do it, so please do it. I don't know what this parameter actually means. It's there. Okay. So like that. The reset is exactly what we saw in JavaScript, reset the search text to empty string, and to reset the filtered items so it would be null. And because no-code is watching all the observables, then this will start displaying the items collection again when this becomes null.
Yeah.
So that's completely client-side. Of course, if you would be displaying a lot of files, then probably it's better to do it on the server. But since this is a demo application, and even if it would not be like even if it would be thousands of files, if you do it via static commands, it would probably not be too bad.
Yeah.
So static commands can either, we have seen static commands calling methods on the server with the allow static command attribute in static command service that is registered here. And also we have just saw a static command that can just make local changes to the view model and not to send anything anywhere. Yeah, just like it would be pure local translated to JavaScript.
Yeah.
So what else we can do with static commands?
We can directly call JavaScript.
Yeah, that's true. And
also, I don't know what else.
Yeah. So let's talk about the options we can use. First, let's look at this model dialog. So let's refresh the app, and there is this add button which can add a new file, but before it needs to ask how this file should be named. So when I click on it, you can see that a dialog appeared, and the thing that we needed JavaScript for is to set focus into this field. Probably that could be done by the autofocus attribute that is present in HTML, but depends if it works with dialogues, and there could be multiple things on the page that where it would collide. So sometimes you need to set focus using JavaScript. Yeah. And in .vvm we never had a function for that, and we should probably add it, and it's not that difficult, so let's see how it is done.
Yeah.
Before that, let's see how the dialog looks like in the code, because in .vvm 5 we have a new component, DOT model dialog, and it's based on the dialog element in HTML. If I get back to DevTools to see the dialog, you can see it's a dialog, which is a relatively new element in HTML. It has open property, which we set by this .vvm model open. Yeah, but it has some open property which you can see if it's manipulate with if it's open or closed, and things like that. So that's the native dialog. Nice thing about that is that it allows to work with a keyboard. So for example, you cannot see my keyboard, but when I press escape, it will close it automatically. Yes. It should be pretty accessible because the browser knows that it's a dialog. It's not just a div that we styled using CSS, appear and hide via JavaScript. It's a semantic element, so that even people who are disabled, who cannot see pretty well or have any kind of disability, they should be able to work with that because it should be accessible. So once you open it and press escape, that should close that dialog. Yeah. So the dialog has this open property, and if it's true, then it would be open, otherwise it would be closed. So we just declared this property in ViewModel, but we don't need to do anything in C#. When we need to open the dialog, I can just say isModel visible equals true. And because there could be some previous value from the last time the dialog was open, I will also reset the new file name field. Yeah, because you can type something, then close the dialog and open it again, so that would be preserved.
So this is what the multiple static commands look like. When we want to set multiple values, we just put a semicolon there and another static command. Or expression. Exactly.
Yeah, you can use semicolon and put there multiple expressions. Just be careful if you would set something in the view model, then call some function on the server that could take some time, and then set something else in the view model, then all the modifications to the view model would be done at the end of the entire static command. So for example, if you want to set is loading, then do something that takes some time, and then set is loading false. That would not work because like the changes to the view model are committed to the view model after static command successfully ends. If there would be some exception, for example, then the view model would not get changed at all. We try to do it as an atomic operation. Of course, you can call your own functions that would have side effects. Then we are not able to do anything about that. But unless you do some simple things, it should work. So either everything would be applied on the view model or nothing happens.
Yeah.
And I wanted to set focus, which requires me to write some JavaScript. And there are two ways how to call JavaScript from static command. One way is that you can implement a function in C# and provide a translation. So you explain to .vvm how this would be translated to JavaScript.
Yeah.
This function in C# maps to this JavaScript expression. And that's what we have here. The other feature, and we can talk about it in some of the next episodes, would be to use a JS module, which is a JavaScript file that gives this .vvm page additional object with methods and some other context, and the page from bindings can call functions on this object.
Okay,
and that's very powerful. You can do very highly interactive pages with that. But it requires writing JavaScript or TypeScript, and TypeScript is not that bad. It's actually very nice language. Just still, it's something a little bit new. So let's see the first method. So I created my own class, Focus Manager, and it has a method called setFocus. And some bindings can be evaluated on the server. So this method must exist in C#. And if it's meaningful for it to do something, it should do the thing. However, setting focus on something that is on the browser, it has no effect on the server. So you can either throw an exception that, sorry, that's not allowed, but maybe a little bit safer is to not do anything, because sometimes if, for example, in server rendering, or if you reuse that same binding, for example, in the resource binding, you want that to be evaluated on the server.
Yeah.
So like you can provide a C# implementation of that. The other thing you need to provide is a JavaScript translation for this method. And that's a little bit complicated, but not that much. In .vvm startup, there is a section in configuration called Markup JavaScript Translator Method Collection. And there is an add method translator method. And this allows you to register a JavaScript translation for a particular method. So I'm saying on the type Focus Manager, the method that is named setFocus would be translated to JavaScript like that. And if you look in this collection, it has a lot of functions we added in .vvm to be able to translate the where, for example. And that's quite important. If you go to .vvm.com/docs and you would search for, I guess, translation, custom JavaScript translators, and there should be value binding, there should be supported expression in value binding. That's a separate page. So if you would look for supported expression, here is a list of everything that you can use in value binding and in static command. So there are basic syntax features of C#, not all of them, but a lot of them, including lambdas, for example. Then what methods on which types are supported. So you can see a lot of things are supported on string. We have collections, so you can manipulate with list and these things. With dictionaries, enums, task. We don't have async await in bindings. Actually, everything is asynchronous because in JavaScript you cannot call the server synchronously, but we do it for you. So you just, in C# it would be anti-pattern to call .result, but in .vvm you can, in bindings you can do that, because we will under the hood translated to await expression.
I was
you can try.
also surprised the first time I saw it, because I was like, that's not how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, because all bindings in .vvm all static commands are asynchronous by nature, so this would be translated to asynchronous. This is just for C# compiler to not complain that you are assigning task of string into string. That's the reason why we had to do that, and this was easier than actually supporting the await keyword. That would be more complicated. You can use string format and various conversions, nullable, and these are link methods. So as you can see, there's a lot of link methods that you can use locally on the client to make local changes in the view model. The only limitation is that we don't support creating new objects in the data bindings. You cannot call new something. So anything that would require new, for example, select for projection to a new object, select is supported, but only for selecting something that is already present in the object. So like that. And date time methods, date only, time only, these are supported in .vvm. So if you are scared that that might not work, it should be. And math methods, and that's it. Web utility, also URL decode and encode, that could be also useful. And we just added focus manager.setFocus. So let's look at this crazy expression, what it actually does. This method, this generic method compiler, takes an array of arguments, and the important thing is that the first argument is this. So args0 is what would be in this, and we are calling static method, so it would always be null. So we can ignore the 0th argument, because that represents this, and it's a static method, so it has no this. And the next elements in that array are the actual arguments that were passed to the method. And this focus manager setFocus, it gets a control ID. So there would be the argument with the index 1, and that would be the value that we passed in the page, so like new file name text box. And that text box I want to focus has this ID equals this. So I just need to call like document get element by ID this thing dot focus. That's what I need to invoke. And here you need to build a JS expression. It's basically a representation of a JavaScript expression. So let's see how the API looks like. We start with JS identifier expression because we need to use document, which is some kind of global object or a member of some global object in the scope. So like JS identifier document, it means it will just write document, and it's an identifier that should mean something. That it has some member, so like get element by ID, it's a member on this document object, and because it's a function, we need to invoke it. So you can imagine that invokes writes the parentheses, and the arguments you put inside it will render these arguments. That's actually what it does. And here I'm passing argument 1, which is the ID of the component, and a little bit nasty thing on this JS expression is that you cannot use the same object twice. So whenever you are not creating your own node in this JS tree, or you are using something that would probably be there, you need to make a clone of it. So I'm using this clone if already used, which will see if that node is actually used in the tree and make a copy. So always, if you get something from outside and you need to embed it in your expression, always use this clone if already used. Or if I would need to use the same argument twice, I would also need to replicate that, because these nodes cannot be in that same tree twice. So like this is the same as document get element by ID and passing that ID in that thing. And that would return some like JavaScript instance of element representing that thing, and that has the focus method on it. So like I will look at the focus member and invoke it without any parameters, and that's exactly what I need to do. Yeah. So if we look in the DevTools, how that produced expression would look like. So it will be here, here, and here.
Yeah.
So as you can see, it's document, get element by ID, new file name text box, focus, and invoked without any parameter. So it's a little bit complicated. You have to think about this expression as a tree of objects, but on the other hand, it gives us great flexibility because you can wrap this function with some other function, and if we would just be composing strings together, then it would be very difficult if you declare a variable, for example, and that variable is declared somewhere else, you will get conflicts. Because it's represented as a tree, we can make some like checking on that tree and renaming things or assigning unique names to things that that would collide with each other. So that's a great thing. The only problem is that syntax is a little bit more difficult to use. But that's still quite useful, and that's how we can just set focus to that. Here is my window. I was looking for the correct one. So when I click on that, you can see the focus is already set. So I can say text.txt, and I can click because this would be submit button and it's in a form that would trigger it.
From our first team.
Yeah, exactly. We've talked about that. One more thing, by default, if you use command, it would run the validation. We also discussed that. So by default, the entire view model is validated. So whenever you use a validation attribute, and click on some button, it would start the validation. You can scope that validation to just a subtree of the view model. So like some object could be the validation target, and you can validate only that portion. But how it works with the staticCommand, because they don't send the view model. So it doesn't make sense when you have staticCommand. It doesn't make sense to validate the view model. You need to validate the arguments of that method.
That's correct.
So when I don't enter the file name and click on that button, I need to display the validation. So, and you can see that this kind of validation is done only on the server. We cannot do it yet on the client, but the traffic is not that big. So for now we decided, and we would need to validate that object on the server anyway, because anyone can like avoid this client-side validation anyway. So the server-side validation is way more important. So how it's done, when I go back to that form, so we can see form, we can see a submit button. That makes me very happy. And this click button, it's using staticCommand, and it's calling file service.create file. And then we can make some, once this file is created, we can hide the model and refresh the list of files, because it might get changed. And that would also, if something is filtered, that would also recalculate that expression, filtered items, because it's depending on that item. So whenever the list of files changed, also the filtered items should recalculate. That's amazing. Like, I really love Knockout.js. Great library that can do that. So it's magic. And when I go to this create file, you can see that I'm validating using a required attribute. I'm validating this file name argument. So you can use data annotation attributes here, or if it would be an object, it can implement this iValidatable object, and also you can push errors in model state. So if you find out that file already exists, which you cannot, the object itself cannot tell that it exists or not, but here you will be able to find it. You can also push errors to model state. However, you need to set this parameter.
That's important.
That's important, and there are two modes, automatic or manual. Manual means that these attributes would be ignored, and you need to push everything in the model state yourself. That's for the compatibility, because if you use models that already have some validation attributes, but in previous versions you relied that static commands don't validate, so that would be a breaking change for you. So this manual mode means ignore the attributes on that object. I will validate it myself. And automatic means that it will look at the validation attributes also. So I'm using this automatic, which will look at attributes of the parameters, or if it would be object, then attributes of these properties.
So if instead of string, it was a create file
model, for example,
file model,
then the required would need to be on that file name property. Yeah. So that's how we can do it in a static command, and the rest is the same. Just we apply this validator value new file name, and that's it basically.
Oh, and one important thing about the validation by default, it's which mode, because on static commands
by default it's disabled.
It's disabled completely.
It's completely disabled unless that attribute says that I want validation. By default it's disabled. Because in previous versions of .vvm, I think before version 4, static commands couldn't do validation. It wasn't implemented, it was a missing feature. And if we would enable it by default, it would be breaking change for people, because if you use some object that has these attributes and you start validating it, it would not be, it would stop working. So that in static commands, the validation is explicit. And because you usually need static commands for just tiny things in the view model for some small manipulation, usually you don't need validation at all. Because you would be using static commands at times where the view model is, for example, not yet complete. You are filling some forms, you fill one field, you want to load some data based on that field, but the rest of the form is not yet filled, so it would stop on the validation. So static commands, it's an advantage that static commands do not have to validate. Just, I would be happier if the default would be the opposite, but we couldn't do it because it would be a breaking change.
So we set on the text box class if it's invalid.
Which Tailwind classes would be applied if that is invalid, and basically that's it.
Okay. So basically, to summarize everything, when thinking about which one to use, command or static command, we can think about it like this. If we have a graph that's like signal error connection to some kind of device that's reading the weather.
Some real-time chart with some real-time data, something like that.
That's a great example of a static command, because that's something that updates just a part of the page, and it updates it continuously, so we get the data packets continuously and we can update it.
And the advantage of static commands is that multiple static commands can easily run in parallel. So if you have several simultaneous static commands that are cherry-picking things in the view model and pushing small patches, they would not collide. If you would do that with command, which is transferring the entire view model to the server, you would probably experience conflicts, because basically the last command wins. There are some mechanisms for queuing or like not allowing more than one command, but like still, if you need more of them at the same time, that would be a problem. So that's what static command is great for.
Or it would be really complex to get the correct state with the command, because they might touch the same data and it might work kind of weirdly. So static commands are for partial updates, and everything else can be normal commands. Except for if we want to call JavaScript. We can't call JavaScript from normal commands, as we've seen.
That would not work.
So, hello, chatter. So, that's basically it. I've seen projects that heavily use static commands, and the one issue kind of is readability, because when you want to do something more complex, like save a form, close modal, and update the list, it's already 3 expressions we have to write, and it's already maybe 3 services we have to include. So for readability's sake, it's not really that nice.
However, on the other hand, I could imagine making some kind of like dialogue service where if you design it cleverly, then it would be just like some one call, like open dialogue. And also a good thing, and we don't have it here in this demo, but in a good thing is not mix up properties for different parts of the page. So for example, this left pane it's a little bit independent. Like it doesn't depend on the model dialog at all.
Yeah.
For example, they are two separate things that don't need to know about each other. So it would make sense to have a child view model for the left side pane, then another view model for what you can see in the main area of the window. We just have a string property, but in the future there could be more. If we want to display a file name, icon,
Yep.
and various things. So let's prepare a child view model for that already, because then you have more flexibility in the future. You will not have to redo it. And then these two things are just for the model dialog. The other parts of the page are not like interested in that. So that's, I think, why you should think about and like basically follow the structure of the UI in your view models and make it to correspond to each other.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things we talked about last time with the validation.
Exactly.
and keeping-
It helps you with the validation targets
yeah.
as well. It has more advantages than that, because like the parts of the page which don't need to know about each other, they shouldn't be wired up in the same class.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it also helps tremendously for reusability. Because if it's like this, we can't create a simple list of files component.
Yeah.
Because it's wired to the specific view model.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to separate this context, and it's really hard to then make a simple control from that.
That's true. That's true. Once you get a separate view model for these three properties, then you can have truly independent file list component that you can use on thousands of other places.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because
great.
you don't want to copy the code.
Yeah.
That's one of the things you don't want to do.
You would have to extract that code from this page, because these properties are here and there are methods that depend on them. So you need to tear that apart and split it and splitting is always more difficult than joining things together. So if you can separate it from the beginning, it's easier.
And then also in the view you'd have to somehow copy exactly the stuff you want. It's really nicer if we were to use components for basically most of the stuff.
And I think the basic strategy for decision if you should use static command or normal command or JavaScript would be like, by default, I'm doing 95% of things with commands. Only when commands are not performing well or it gets too heavy, because we have some applications where the view model contains a lot of information and I want just to make a trivial change of it, then static command is great for that. Once the page starts being more dynamic, not just that you load something and wait for user to click on something, if you need more interaction in that, then static commands could be helpful. And once it becomes really real time, or you need to integrate some other third-party things like charts or maps or anything that is very complex, then I would probably use the JS module approach, which we can show the next time, because it's really powerful and basically there are no limits in .vvm, because if you can use that, you can do everything the browser allows you to do.
So basically a simple table would just need commands. But a very dynamic graph that in real time shows the data would need static commands or just raw JavaScript, just fully JavaScript.
Depends how much how many interactions are there, but I would say like use commands by default, and once you reach the limits, then you can achieve a lot even with these bind attributes which I showed. And also if you make private set, that is the same as bind server to client. So it's nicer syntax if you say private set, but you can optimize a lot of traffic just because of that. But then you can use static commands to go one step further. I have seen a couple of applications which were done only by static commands.
Yeah, me too.
And I like it. It was working. It's fine. However, it's more difficult than it has to be, because on some places if you need to load everything that's on the page, then you can just do normal command, because you would not save anything. Just it would be a little bit more complicated syntax. So like it depends. If you need to change just one thing in the view model, static command is great. If you need to load 90% of the things that are on the page, static commands do not add that much value.
And also, it will be harder for performance reasons in the new .vvm version, since we use the diffing and we already have performance updates and we already think about that. So it will be even harder to justify using static commands outside of real-time applications like extreme user interactivity.
And what's also very nice is to learn not to place any business logic in the view model. Like here in this pre-render method, I'm not looking in the file system. I'm calling a service, get files.
Yeah.
I'm just wiring things up. I'm not doing any actual logic here. And that's great, because once you have this exposed as a file service, request by dependency injection, and once you work with small clean models that do not contain more than they have to, then transitioning from command to static command is just adding this attribute on the service, because you already have it. So like, I think that designing the things properly from scratch, from the first line of code, it helps you in the future, because once you find, okay, I need to stop using command for this, I need to transition to static command, you already have the method, just decorate it with attribute and call it from where you need to. So that's also a good idea to prepare that, because this page looks simple, but if we would continue working on it, that could get very complicated, because it could become another second better Visual Studio Code, for example. I can imagine that. Of course, my imagination is like very far ahead the reality sometimes, but like, and that would be really, really complicated. So it's good to think about that at the beginning, and it's not over engineering, or like try to not over engineer things, but like if you have a class that has 10 properties, not 10, but it would soon be 10, and there would be clusters of things that are related to each other, then just separating them to few classes, it's not over engineering. Class per section of the page, it's not over engineering. I think it's just like reasonable approach to be reasonably prepared for the future. Okay,
that's great.
So I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and it was fun. Thank you for a nice application with static commands. We have discussed a lot, and next time we can look either at JS modules or maybe we will find some other ideas in our .vvm kitchen. And if you have anything that you would be interested in to see how to do it in .vvm, or if you are, for example, struggling with that, .vvm does things in some way and you want to improve the user experience, like just give us an idea and we can make a next episode about something that could help you with your project. So thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you for today's episode, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.